welcome to Web of Stories. My name is Melinda. Today is September 15th and I am doing my weekly wrap up. Before I get to the books, let me tell you what's going on in our life. Today is my and my husband's 16th wedding anniversary. So we're gonna go out for dinner tonight. We're gonna leave the kids home. I got them the Spider-Man Across the Universe DVD. They don't know this yet. They've been throwing a fit because they didn't get to see it in the theater. So I have that for them and I'll give that to them so they can not complain about being left at home. We're gonna go out for dinner and then we're gonna go see A Haunting in Venice. If you know me, I'm a Agatha Christie fan, and of course I've got to go see that movie. I am actually gonna do a reaction video to it. They'll be out on Tuesday. Once I finish this wrap up, I'm gonna do like the intro part of that wrap up, just kind of like my pre-movie thoughts. So that's happening. Kids are busy with school. So I think starting next week, I think my daughter's gonna be busy after school with theater. She's signed up to do tech on the play. They're doing Antigone this fall. They're only doing 2 plays this year. I thought they did 3. They're doing Antigone in the fall and Once Upon a Mattress in the spring. My daughter does not sing, so she'll probably do tech on the second one as well if she enjoys doing it this time. And then I always forget to mute my computer, so you're gonna hear Discord stuff. Sorry. My son hopefully soon will be starting his D&D club that meets once a week after school. So he's really looking forward to that. That's really the only thing about middle school he was looking forward to was a D&D club. Yeah. I think I mentioned in my last video that he got put into choir because they didn't have enough people sign up to choir, so they just put people in it. And Wednesday he had the opportunity to request a transfer and he decided not to. So I asked him, I'm like, oh, that's great. I don't really care if he transfers or not. It's like he would transfer to drama, so either class is fine. And I said, oh, what are you liking choir? He's like, no, but you know, it's upstairs. I don't want to have to go downstairs for drama. So he's going to be in choir for a semester for pure laziness, but that's okay. He's enjoying it. It's an easy A class. So there you go. So yes, tonight is my wedding anniversary, or today is my wedding anniversary, 16 years. Next Friday, big one, half a century for me. I'm going to have to just accept the fact that I'm middle-aged. I've been fighting it. Hence, I'm warming up to it with my appropriate mug, my Golden Girls mug. For those of you who think the Golden Girls are so old, they recently rebooted Sex and the City. The Golden Girls, their first season, they were all younger than the characters and actresses in the first season of the Sex and the City reboot. So there you go. Things have changed. My daughter and I sometimes watch the Golden Girls, and I always have to explain 80s references to her. She asked me like who Nancy Reagan was and things like that. It's interesting. But anyway, so that's kind of what's going on here. So let me get into the books. And this week I only finished 2 books again. However, the 2 books I finished were probably the reason why I only finished 2 books last week and this week. If you remember last week, I thought that I had 2 book club discussions last weekend. And it ended up I only had 1 because I got confused with one of my book clubs that were actually discussing it next month. So I was really rushing on these 2 books, which meant that I wasn't reading my other books as much as I normally would. So for 2 weeks, I really only finished 2 things. But this week, the 2 things I finished were those 2 books. So the first one was Hester by Laurie, Lico, Albanese. So I read this because the Book Cougars were doing Scarlet Summer, and I love the Scarlet Letter. And this is not a Scarlet Letter retelling. It's a suggestion of what might have inspired the Scarlet Letter. So it was interesting because the 3 books we did for this were The Scarlet Letter, Hester, and The Invisible Hour by Alice Hoffman. And almost everyone preferred Hester to the Invisible Hour except me. I preferred The Invisible Hour to Hester. My issues with Hester really only had 2 issues. One was, I thought the writing was great, so I would definitely read more by this author. But the first one was, it was very, very on the nose. Like there was no room for interpretation. This was a Scarlet Letter inspired book and everything's going to match up. And I don't really like that when people do that. Those sort of like matching things up and trying to do a pre-telling or a prequel or something like that. I like it to be vaguer, more vague, I guess is the correct way to say that. And this one was just a little too on the nose for me. Put a pin in that thought because I'll come back to it. The other one is I felt they tried to cover too much in this book. You had the whole Scarlet Letter thing. You had their storyline about African Americans who were freed and African Americans who were enslaved and how that was being handled. Not that that's not a valid storyline, and not that that wasn't interesting, because it actually was interesting, but it was too much for this book and what it was trying to tell. And there were some other little out there. It was just too much. I felt like she was trying to accomplish too much with this book. Now, the book Cougars interviewed her, and I held that interview until after I had finished this book, and then I listened to it. And she said in it, and I understand where she's coming from with this. If you, as a white writer, mention an African-American character, then you have to develop it. I agree with that. I mean, I do agree with that. I don't think you have to develop it the way it is there. You can still give these characters agency and respect without going into this whole other subplot that takes away from the main focus of the book. So that was really kind of my issues with this book. Back to it being a retelling. I should have flipped those. I'm sorry, but back to that. I think what actually did hurt my enjoyment of this book a little too much was that I had just recently reread The Scarlet Letter. And I know for a lot of people, and I understand this, for a lot of people, it really enhanced the reading of Hester. For me, it was the opposite, because I've read The Scarlet Letter more times than I can count. It's one of my very favorite books. But it was so fresh in my brain that all those lines kept being drawn. And I found that a little irritating, whereas other people would probably really like that. So I understand it's a preference, but I think this just wasn't a book for me. And that's fine. Or it might not have been a book for me right now when I had just recently read The Scarlet Letter and recently read The Invisible Hour, a book that I ended up enjoying more, even though I think that The Invisible Hour is a flawed book that has its issues. But it's also, I'm okay with, because of who I am, because of the basis of that book, and because of who wrote it and all my expectations with that book was a success for me. Maybe despite of the book itself, if that makes any sense. So it's just the way things are. So that was Hester. We did discuss it. It was a great discussion. The book Cougars, Chris and Emily, they're like, could lead a master class on leading these discussions. They do them so well. I try to absorb some of their skill when I lead discussions for my other book club, because they're much better than I am at it. So they're so good. Anyway, the other book I finished was Olga Dies Dreaming by Xochitl. Am I pronouncing that right? I don't know if I'm pronouncing that right. Gonzalez. So this is for my marginalized book club, my marginalized authors book club. I thought we were discussing it this month, but this was actually our off month when we just talk about book recommendations. We're doing it next month. So I'm ahead of the game for that one. But this is, Olga is a Puerto Rican American. Well, she's Puerto Rican and she's American. Those things are together because Puerto Ricans are Americans in New York. That's what I'm trying to say. She's not in Puerto Rico. She's in New York. And her brother is also there. Her brother is, I think, 5 or 6 years older than she is. He played a large part in raising her because their parents' marriage kind of fell apart. The father got into drugs, contracted HIV, developed AIDS, and died. Their mother, before this happened, left them to be a revolutionary in Puerto Rico. So both Olga and her brother Prieto have, I hope I'm pronouncing that correctly too, have their own storylines. And to me, that was the problem with this book. I was actually really interested in Olga's storyline. I think Olga was an interesting character. There is a romantic element to this book. It's not a romance because the romantic element plays a part in Olga's character development. But it reminded me a lot of Akwaeke Emeze's You Made a Fool of Death with Your Beauty. And yes, I know that book had some issues for me. The relationship was not the issue. I actually thought that was done well in that book, and I think it's done well in this book. I was really interested in it. I thought Olga was a very interesting character. She comes from a large Puerto Rican family, and we know she has the family issues with her parents. She was raised by her abuelita, her grandmother, and her brother. But then she also has all these aunts and uncles and cousins. And of those, we really only get to meet in a way that you will remember one of her cousins. So I found that I found that a little weird. And then we have Prietos, who's, we have his storyline. He is a congressman representing their district in Brooklyn. And this is not a spoiler. I believe it's in the blurb, but he's being blackmailed for reasons that become very clear. I was not interested in his story. I didn't find his story compelling. I didn't find it especially original, and it was not written in a way that really tugged at my emotions the way Olga's story did. Now, I think that Prieto had a very important part to play in Olga's story. What I wish Gonzalez would have done was to put Prieto more with the rest of the family, developed that family with a little bit more distinction among the characters. So it would be something kind of akin to like the family in my big fat Greek wedding movies. Like it's a big family, but everyone's kind of distinct. You have the characters. They don't get their own, they're not so distinct that they have their own storylines and all that, but they're distinct enough that you remember who they are. They each play a certain role in the life of Olga. I wish he had gone into that group and that group was better developed. I think that would have made this a much stronger book. And I think that what Gonzalez was trying to say through Olga's story would have been a lot clearer and a lot more compelling. I ended up giving this book a B, mostly because I did really enjoy Olga's story. And at the end, I was kind of like really turning the pages. The other thing that I thought was really interesting is the relationship. The mother's very barely in this book. She does appear at one point, but lots of times you get to know her through letters. And this is a toxic woman, and it's pretty clear. But the way Gonzalez writes it is the reader can tell pretty quickly that the mother is toxic, but it is also clear that her children cannot tell that. And I thought that was very skillfully done. And I think that that was handled all really well. The reactions to it, the way that it was manifesting in the lives of her children was pretty clear, that to explain some of the decisions that they made. I thought that was really well done. So I ended up giving this book a B on the strength of those two things, Olga's story and the way she handled the issues with the mother. But I was not satisfied with Prieto's story, and I wish the family had been better written, for lack of a better word. I think it would have been so much more interesting to have that really kind of full family back there. Again, not with their own storylines, because you don't want to crowd out this book, but the characters distinct and lifelike enough that you remember who they are, and they each play a different role in Olga's life. So those are the two books that I finished. Now, according to Goodreads, as I explained last week, it looks like I have a lot of books going. I think it looks like I have 11 books going. Some of those are for my short story September project. So I am not including here my short story collections. And so on beside that, I have 4 books. No, I have 6 books going, which is too many, I know. But let me go through it. The first book I have going, and I'm almost finished with this, is Clytemnestra by Constanza Casati. This is my foray into Greek myth retellings. I'm really enjoying this. Every once in a while I come across a book where I just want to read this book, and this is it. I just can't because I have other things going on. But I do make an effort to spend a good amount of time each day reading this book. I should finish it today or tomorrow. Again, I am not super familiar with a lot of Greek history, Greek myths, Greek mythology, that sort of thing. My daughter is, so I can always ask her. But I had no trouble following this. I read the Odyssey at least twice in school, and there is a fair amount of Odyssey issues in here. Clytemnestra was Helen of Troy's sister, and Odysseus shows up in this, their cousin, at least in the book. I don't know if they're really in the Greek mythology, Greek history, if this is true, but at least in this book, Penelope, Odysseus' wife, is their cousin. So you get some Odyssey stuff in there. So that really helped me. I don't think it's necessary to read it. As for it being an on-ramp to Greek mythology retellings, it's my on-ramp to Greek mythology retellings, and it's working. So I'm going to say, yes, this is a good place to start. I think that there's lots of good places to start, though, with Greek mythology. So I am really enjoying this and hope to finish it today or tomorrow. So the next book I have going in print, last week I had going digitally, and that is Tightrope by Nicholas D. Kristof and Sheryl WuDunn. This is for my library book club, and you can tell I am like having the heck out of this. I had a digital loan of it that I started reading, and then my physical loan came in. So I just tabbed up what I had and decided to continue with the physical and return the digital so someone else can have it. So this is Really a thought-provoking book. I can't say, though, that I'm completely sold on it yet. I'm like 40% of the way through on it. I am that far through. Nicholas Kristof is native to this area. He's native. Cove Orchard was the community he came from. He went to Yamhill Carleton High School. So that's in Yamhill County, which is the county next to the county I live in. And it's very close. I mean, we're not that far from the county line. So very close to where I live. And he talks about the people that he kind of grew up with. And there's a lot of rural poverty with it. And this is, I think I discussed this not last week. 2022 was the last time we had a gubernatorial election, and Nicholas Kristof tried to run for governor. So he had grown up in Oregon. He had moved to New York. I figured this out now. New York City, and became a columnist for the New York Times. He has since, I believe, well, according to this book, they still live in New York, but I think he has moved back to Oregon, and he did that in an attempt to run for governor, but he had not been here long enough to meet the residency requirements to be on the ballot. So he did not actually run for governor. And as far as I am in this book, I'm not entirely sure I would have voted for him in the primary. If that's the case, I would have voted for whoever the blue nominee was. But for the primary, I'm not sure I would have voted for him. There's a lot of good ideas. There's a lot of research in here, and he presents the issues very well. As of right now, as to where I am in the book, which is about 40-some%, he's not presenting a lot of solutions. Now, that might come later in the book. So there is that. I am a little frustrated with two things with this book. One is the writing style. He co-wrote this with his wife, and it feels like two people wrote this book. And I said that before with something that I read recently. Oh, Reykjavik. I don't like it in most cases, I don't like it when there are two authors and you can tell there are two authors, and you can very much tell there's two authors. The parts that I'm assuming Kristof wrote feel like something you would find in the New York Times. The parts that WuDunn wrote, she's his wife, I don't know if I mentioned that, that she wrote feel much like Kristof's wife is writing it. And the point of view changes between the two. And I'm finding that very disconcerting and really annoying to read that, honestly. That's an editorial thing. Someone should have said, no, you need to fix that. I do think part of the reason why is I think this is, you know how lots of times people will release their memoir before they run for president? I think this was his book before he ran for governor kind of thing. That I'm kind of getting that point of view, or that kind of idea. So we'll see. So that's annoying. The other thing that's really bothering me, and I'm going to try to not get too political with this, but several times he's mentioned, of all the ills of society, he has mentioned single parents, one family household, single parents. And at one point he talks about, like, when men go to prison, they come out, they're not marriageable. I'm really uncomfortable with the way he's handling this. And I do know in sociological studies, when they're studying poverty, single parent households is something they study. Now, if you look at things of rates of incarceration and education, that's pretty straightforward. But when you're looking at single parents, single parentage, single parent children, single income houses, that's not as straightforward. And the way he's writing about it so far really feels like he's not going into really seeing what the problem is. Because the problem is, as far as I can tell, in my experience, everything I've read, everything is that it's not single parents. Like, what children need to thrive is they need to have their needs met and they need to feel secure and loved. And a single parent family can do that. They might need extra support. There is nothing in a single parent that says you can't have that. And also, you can be in a two-parent family and still not have that. So I'm thinking like he's throwing single parents around. Out of child wedlock is another term I think he uses at one point a lot of times. And I'm very uncomfortable with that. Also, the other thing is, yes, I know there are single fathers. I'm not saying there aren't. But especially in the rural situations, the poverty situations he's talking about, the quiet part out loud is he's talking about single mothers. And that feels very anti-woman to me. And he is not yet, He might mention at some point, but he has not yet even touched on the availability, or excuse me, the affordability and the accessibility of childcare, which I think is a very important component to the arguments he's making in this book, have not, as of this point, been mentioned. They might still be mentioned. I'm critiquing it now because he has already mentioned the single parent issue, the marriage issue, the out of wedlock children issue several times, and hasn't even mentioned the word childcare. And I think that is really, he's talking about what government and what society can do to help with these situations. And I think that is like one of the number one things they can do, because if you're looking at the rural poor, and I'm going way off. I'm sorry on this. Stay with me. Rural poor, single parent, and let's face it, he's talking about a single mother. To get a job, if she doesn't have a support system of her parents, her family, other people who can take care of it, she has to pay for childcare. The kind of job that she's likely to get is not even going to be enough to pay for the childcare. So if you just look at the dollars on a piece of paper without any other consideration, we're just looking at dollars, it makes more sense for this mother to stay at home, not work, and get assistance. Now, obviously that's not ideal because there's a lot of other issues with that. So, but he's not even there's a lot of other issues. He doesn't touch on any of those. He doesn't touch on the fact that if she had, which you're talking about rural poor mostly in this book, there might not even be an option for childcare in a lot of these situations. So if she even had access to childcare, could she afford it? It's just not something that he's even talking about. Again, so far, the only reason why I'm bringing it up now is that he's mentioned the other stuff, the single parent, so many times. And I'm like, okay, if you're going to bring it up, you need to talk about it. You need to talk about it fast. That's kind of my issue with this. So I'm really kind of torn on this book so far. So that's what I'm reading in print. Now, on digital. This is obviously not in digital because I'm holding up a book, but I'm reading The Secrets of Hartwood Hall for Secrets of September. There's a group of us doing a read along of it. I already had a digital copy of it, so that's what I'm using to read. But I won a giveaway. Katie Lumsden did a giveaway, and I won, and I got a copy, and I'm missing the page. Where is it? It's even inscribed to me. So thank you, Katie. I got the book. I'm really enjoying this book so far. I'm liking the fact that we're reading it as a group. It's slowing me down, so it's not a burden on all my other reading because I don't have to read that much a day to keep up. In fact, I'm ahead of schedule right now because I started going at one point and couldn't stop. There's 4 volumes of the book, so we're reading it over 4 weeks, and we're in second week, so volume 2, and it's a shorter section, so I don't have as much to read, and I just kept reading, so I'm ahead of the game there. But I'm really enjoying that. I'm reading that digitally. The next book I am reading is The Rachel Incident by Carolyn O'Donoghue. And if you could not tell by her name, she is an Irish author. I just started this yesterday and I'm enjoying it. It is about a woman and so far what I can tell is it's about a woman and her relationship with her friend, who she met when she was in college. I don't think he was in college, and they were sort of like this very fast type friendship. And it's, her friend is a gay man. So they have that, very close, very platonic relationship going. And it's actually so far kind of fun to read about. There's also something developing with her that happened between her and one of her professors in college. And I'm not far enough to know what it was, but she does say, like, in the first chapter, so this is not a spoiler, that everyone thinks she slept with this professor. So I'm interested to see what happens. Very readable, very fun. I'm enjoying it. And then the third ebook I have going is a NetGalley book. And this is The Daughters of Block Island by Christa Carmen, I think. I wrote it down and I can't read my writing. It'll be down below. This is a Gothic novel, and they do not let you forget that it is a Gothic novel. And I've only read it for one day, so I can't say much, but it's set in Massachusetts, Maine. It starts in Massachusetts. I can't remember if Block Island is in Maine or not. Oh, well. So I can't say much about it at this point. It's a NetGalley. I have 3 NetGalley books that are releasing in October that I want to read in September, so they're ready to go. If I get that done, then I'll go back and catch up on the September ones I missed before October, in which case I'll read November. Speaking of NetGalley, oh, this video is going on too long. I'm sorry. Speaking of NetGalley, I'm going to be really careful going forward about how much I request. I'm only going to request books that I would get for myself and read anyway if they weren't NetGalley books, because I'm feeling very overwhelmed by NetGalley, honestly. But okay, so those are the 3 ebooks. And then my audiobook is Tom Lake Still by Ann Patchett, narrated by Meryl Streep. Very delightful. Taking it slow, that's fine. The one thing I did want to touch on, because I'm finishing Clytemnestra today or tomorrow, is my next print book. It's going to be The River We Remember by William Kent Kruger. I love William Kent Kruger. I'm so excited for this book. My only frustration with Clytemnestra is that I'm still reading it and I want to read this book. So yeah, I'll be starting this one soon. Okay, this video has gone longer than I had planned. So if you made it this far, thank you very much. Let me know by putting a kitty cat in it. I always say kitty cat because my cat's around here somewhere, but it's just so I know you made it to the end. Thank you very much. Give me a thumbs up, subscribe to my channel if you haven't already. It really helps me. And I will see you in the next video. Bye.